Hello everyone and welcome to the post-match reaction video for the defeat to Napoli in the Supercoppa Italiana. I know this is an unfamiliar face sitting down to discuss this particular game. It's normally Stefano or Lorenzo, but they are unfortunately otherwise engaged. So I've decided to step up and do this one. And what a game I've picked. Our Supercoppa Italiana defence ends at the first hurdle, you might say, losing in the semi-finals to Antonio Conte's Napoli. I don't think that the result in isolation is a disgrace or anything like that, but obviously it's another objective that's vanished at a bit of a whimper in the same way that the Coppa Italia campaign ended to Lazio at the first real test that we faced. So there's a bit of a bitter feeling to this one. Now, I know everybody has their own kind of scale on where they place the Supercoppa in terms of its importance, and it ranges from an afterthought, an almost pre-season type tournament that we shouldn't really care about, to those who remember how significant the celebrations were after we beat Inter and Juve in the last edition, coming from behind to secure our 50th trophy as a club in our 125th season. I'm of the opinion, sort of somewhere in between, that I don't think that any cup competition is one that we should instantly just punt into the sea, because I think that, if you are able to win and win in a certain fashion, then it can have a positive impact on your season. And it's not as if we have a chock full calendar at the moment. We are out of the cup. We only have the league to focus on. And so this was kind of a 4 or 5 day period where we could put everything into trying to utilise Max's reputation as a bit of a cup specialist. And unfortunately, the campaign has kind of faded away. Talking about the starting lineup, there were some changes, but they were almost obligatory. You've got Cone De Vinter coming into the centre of defence with Matteo Gabbia having hyperextended his knee in that Sassuolo draw at the weekend. There was Pavlovic and Tomori either side of him. Salamakers keeps his spot. Ruben Loftus-Cheek keeps his spot, and as does Adrien Rabiot. And then you've got Nkunku Pulisic up top again, with Rafael Leao not even making the bench in the end. Two interesting things dropped today on the day of the game, which was that Adon Yashari was going to play as the regista, so in the Luka Modric role, and then Pervis Estupiñán was going to come in for Davide Barzagli. And in the build-up to the game, Allegri confirmed to Mediaset that Barzagli he felt a slight problem in his flexor, so he didn't think it was right to risk him, because otherwise, given the game he had against Sassuolo, you'd have definitely thrown him in there. And whether that just disrupted the rhythm of things a little bit, I don't know, but I don't think Yashari or Estupiñán had horror shows by any means. Unfortunately, the horror shows did come on both goals. The other two lads, and on the main podcast, we've kind of spoken at length about how this is a defence that still seems to be capable of conceding goals from silly errors and doing so in multiples. It's usually 2, let's face it. And in this instance, Napoli score a goal at a very good time, just leading up to half-time, as it looked like the first half was fading out towards a stalemate. And then just as we were perhaps, trying to make that push to equalise in the second half, they got that killer goal. And that's actually something kind of typical of a Conte team. We saw Conte's Inter team do that to us quite a bit as well. Obviously, this is a completely different setup, but the 3-5-2 versus the 3-4-2-1. The first goal comes from David Neres. I think it's just a general switch off, to be honest. That supply goes in down the right side of our box, so over on Tomori's side, but it's because it's Rasmus Højlund who has made that run into the channel of space. Cone De Vinter follows him out there, and he almost does the right thing in the sense that he makes sure that Højlund remains with his back to goal, and therefore he isn't able to turn, dart, spin, whatever, and create a more threatening situation. But Højlund does a good job keeping the play alive. He leathers it low and hard across the 6-yard box, which is all you can really ask for a striker to do in that situation. And where he might want to be to finish it was where Neres was standing, unopposed, to tap in from 6 yards. Someone has to track the runner there. How many times have we said it? The 2 Sassuolo goals, nobody tracking runners into the box where they're approaching a dangerous area for an easy tap in, as Neres had. And then I think Mike Maignan doesn't cover himself in glory with that either, because he gets a pretty strong hand to it, but manages only to divert it into the path of the man who's waiting there. Although it all happens so quick, it's not quite a howler like Sommer for the Pulisic derby winner, I say, where he could have put it anywhere else. So that just wasn't a good sequence defensively for us. There were several failings leading up to the ball hitting the back of the net. And then, for the second goal, I'm afraid this is really bad play all round from De Winter and from Maignan. The ball into Højlund on, again, the right side of our box, Napoli's left channel, was way too easy to play in there, don't get me wrong. But the spaces had started to open up, and you thought that ball was on more and more. And again, Højlund does a good job, but this time De Winter does not show him towards the right area at all. In fact, he allows him to shift it onto his foot to hammer a low shot. And I just don't understand how Maignan gets beat from that narrow angle. Yeah, you can say it's first shot, whatever, but his positioning seems to be okay, and he almost kind of lifts his boot to let it go under and in off the near post. And I just think it's interesting because Maignan has had a season once again where he's won us more points than he's lost us, without a shadow of a doubt. And then you get that big surge in the narrative that we absolutely must do everything that we can to renew him. People sort of saying at any cost and things like that. And I just wonder if the last couple of weeks might have put the brakes on things a bit, because I think he could have done better on some of the goals. We had some moments in this particular game. There was, for example, that one where Napoli had a corner cleared and Salamakers leads a 3-on-2 break. And this was a frustrating one because this should be the bread and butter of an Allegri team, and it has been our bread and butter against Napoli already this season, where we won 2-1 at San Siro in the league meeting. And Salamakers leads this break. It's a 3-on-2. He's got Pulisic to his left and Kunku to his right. You can make an argument for going to either, but I think I would have maybe gone left to Pulisic on his left foot, and then he can hit it back across goal. But he goes right to Nkunku. The pass is about 5 yards behind him, so he has to stop in his tracks. It halts his momentum. He has to set himself. I almost don't really blame him for taking the shot on because, he was given the supply, but he lashes it way over the bar. At the same time, Tomori's making kind of an overlapping run on his right, so you could say maybe he should have looked up and fed it to him if he was going to fire an off-balance shot. But yeah, that was a bad one, and I think that kind of sums up where we were at, really. I mean, there were some changes in the second half, which I thought were interesting. We saw Yusuf Fofana and Zakaria Takame come on for De Winter and Salamakers in what appeared to be a bit of a switch to a 4-3-3. And then Modric did come on for Shashari. So I think maybe Allegri used that end period of the game when we were 2-0 down ultimately to experiment tactically a little bit and just see if he could realign the pieces in a way that when we need goals, we can offer more threat. But I have to be honest, and sort of circling back to the narrative mentioned at the start here, it was kind of the attitude and the mentality that worried me a little bit in this game. And again, I want everyone to kind of cast aside their thoughts on the Supercoppa and whether they think it's the most important thing or the most pointless thing in the world. Ultimately, one team was up for that game this evening, and it was Napoli. Now, you can say they were motivated for revenge after the league defeat. You can say that they are in perhaps a bit better shape in terms of their squad depth and things like that. But I think, their midfield is plagued by injuries at the moment. So they'd maybe argue the other way with that. But there were moments in this where I think one team showed that they're up for it. And, McTominay was at the heart of a lot of that, in my opinion. A couple of times there were some altercations between the players and a bit of a timid reaction on our side while they came storming and surging in, particularly that one at the end where McTominay clears out on Kunku and then Tomori leaves a bit in on the follow through. McTominay kind of goes wild and he is, really, really going for Tomori, and our guys just kind of back down. That to me was not what you'd like to see. You may think that's trivial, but I think that was almost a symptomatic episode of how this particular night went. It's difficult to really pick out anybody for praise, to be totally honest. I think if you were trying to pick a top and if you're trying to pick a flop of the match, you'd be spoiled for choice. I mentioned Maignan and De Winter. I don't think it was a good night from them at all. I think Yashari was a little bit quiet. I think Loftus-Cheek has had better days than that. And Nkunku, again, showing that he's kind of being used in a role that he's not very familiar with at all. And yeah, there's not exactly a huge amount to pick from in terms of the positives. It's worrying that it's all gone a little bit flat in that sense. Now, what's important, because this is not, I don't feel like this is a season defining defeat by any means, right? And we've still got a long unbeaten run going in the league, and we've still got the opportunity to post some good points over the festive period and heading into January that will kind of make us forget about all this very quickly. But you look at the fixture list here, we've got Verona at home on the 28th of December, Cagliari away on January the 2nd, Genoa at home on 8th of Jan, Fiorentina away, who are in a crisis, on the 11th of Jan, leading up to Como on the 15th away from home, Lecce at home on the 18th of Jan. Then you get to Roma away on the 25th. So you've got a decent run of games there where we simply have to prove that we can rack up points consistently, that we can put these defensive deficiencies behind us. And please, I ask for one thing for Christmas, and that is that we're able to see Leao and Pulisic from the start for more than one league game at a time. That's what we need, right? I wouldn't mind a couple more presents under the tree with regards to the squad construction, such as a target man that isn't someone who scored 3 goals in 18 months at West Ham and who doesn't get injured once every 2 months, it seems. So yeah, someone a bit more useful in that sense would be nice. And I think it's becoming increasingly apparent that we are lacking an experienced, dependable, versatile centre-back to insert into that 3-man defence at times of need. Because Kone De Winter, we've got 4 for 3 positions at the moment, with De Winter being 4th in the hierarchy. I'd argue he's not even fit to be that. I'm afraid he's just not playing at that level. I didn't hate the deal when it happened, but some things just don't work out. And Malik Chow is having, a fantastic time by the sounds of things at Newcastle, and the guy we've replaced him with ultimately isn't doing the business so far. So whether a defeat like this also makes the management think, okay, let's go for a Thiago Silva, or let's probe for Sergio Ramos, or there will be other centre-backs out there as well that teams might consider parting with. I think that this, if nothing else, teaches us how far off it some of our backups are, and that even throwing away another competition in the way that we have, the season is still long, injuries are going to happen. And if we are to go deep sort of march towards the final stretch of the season and still be competing for a decent objective, then Max needs a bit of help, because at the moment he's working a minor miracle. But yeah, it's a bit of a negative one for my first ever post-match reaction. But I hope that you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the main pod, which is coming early next week, where we'll talk a bit more in depth about this particular game. Stay tuned as well for the next bonus podcast, which will be coming out on the Friday. If you're listening to this, it'll be coming out on Friday. It's a chat about the example that Bartizaghi, Gabbia, Kamada have set by coming through the youth system to establish themselves in Serie A football. The talents that might follow. We saw 6 of them on the bench tonight from the Futuro team. And how the youth teams are getting on this season. So yeah, go check that out when it's out. Thank you very much for watching this. If you did, let me know your thoughts on the game, your tops and flops, everything like that. And I will catch you in the next one.